Ukraine's targeted strikes on Russian oil refineries threaten energy flows that millions across Europe depend on for fuel and power. This is Omni, episode 135. Ukrainian forces hit 2 Russian oil refineries in coordinated strikes. President Zelenskyy stated the military carried out the attacks as part of efforts to weaken Russia's war economy. Russian forces continued strikes on Ukrainian cities in the same period. Lithuania's defense minister, Robertas Kaunas, warned that Russia could be considering possible false flag provocations against NATO countries in the Baltic region. Kaunas said there was no specific date for any potential Russian actions, but authorities were monitoring Russia's plans and exchanging information with Poland and other NATO allies. The Guardian reported the refinery hits as a direct response to sustained Russian bombardment of Ukrainian urban areas. Lithuanian Defense Minister Robertas Kaunas warned that Russia might stage false flag incidents near NATO borders and said Baltic states were sharing intelligence with Poland and other allies to monitor developments. Ukrainian officials framed the refinery strikes as necessary pressure on Russia's ability to fund its military campaign. Russian statements, reflected in regional coverage, present Ukrainian actions as escalation that endangers civilian energy supplies. The strikes occurred against a backdrop of continued Russian attacks on Ukrainian cities, with both sides exchanging blows that affect energy infrastructure on each side of the border. What happens next? The first compliance deadlines land in 6 months, and regulators say the earliest enforcement cases will show how strictly the rules bite. Shifting now to Sudan. More than 200 pyramids at the Meroe site face damage from Sudan's ongoing war and lack of protection. The location holds UNESCO World Heritage status. Fighting and neglect have left the structures exposed. Combat near the site and the withdrawal of conservation teams have increased the risk of irreversible harm to the sandstone monuments. Al Jazeera documented the physical risks to the pyramids from nearby combat and abandoned conservation work. Sudanese authorities have limited capacity to secure remote heritage sites while resources focus on immediate security needs. International heritage groups note that similar conflicts elsewhere have led to irreversible losses when sites remain unguarded for extended periods. The combination of active fighting and reduced maintenance has created conditions where even minor incidents could accelerate deterioration of the structures. Next, an Ebola outbreak in Congo-Kinshasa. Child deaths from Ebola have passed 300 in the current outbreak. UNICEF reports that fear and service disruption have cut childhood immunizations, safe deliveries, and other essential care by more than 40% in the hardest-hit areas. Local health workers must divide attention between treating Ebola cases and sustaining regular medical services. The drop in routine care raises the prospect of secondary outbreaks of diseases that vaccines normally prevent. All Africa coverage highlights how local health workers are stretched between outbreak response and maintaining regular services. UNICEF emphasizes that reduced routine care risks secondary outbreaks of preventable diseases. Health officials in the region state that restoring trust in clinics remains a central challenge while transmission continues. The decline in safe deliveries and immunizations stems directly from both facility closures and community avoidance of health centers during the outbreak. Meanwhile, China has opened an investigation into the U.S. cybersecurity firm Palo Alto Networks. Beijing's Cyberspace Administration launched a review of products sold in China by the U.S. firm. The stated goal is to protect critical infrastructure and reduce cybersecurity risks. The administration said the review was being conducted to ensure the secure and stable operation of critical information infrastructure, prevent cybersecurity risks and vulnerabilities, and safeguard national security. The probe follows recent U.S. restrictions on Chinese technology companies. The South China Morning Post reported the probe follows recent U.S. restrictions on Chinese technology. Chinese regulators describe the step as a standard security check applied to foreign suppliers. U.S. industry observers see it as part of broader reciprocal measures in the technology sector. The investigation targets products already installed in Chinese networks and examines whether they introduce vulnerabilities into systems that support essential services. Turning to the economy, SpaceX posted a 92% revenue increase in its first post-IPO results. The company reported a sharp rise in revenue for the period after its public listing. Growth came mainly from launch contracts and satellite services. Early engineer André Lavoie, who joined in 2009, described plans to sell portions of his shares now that the company is publicly traded. The results reflect sustained demand across both commercial and government customers. Nikkei Asia noted the results reflect continued demand for commercial and government launches. Investors have focused on whether the post-IPO structure changes capital allocation for future projects. A BBC profile of an early engineer highlighted individual shareholders now able to sell portions of their holdings. The revenue jump occurred even as the company manages expanded operations across multiple launch sites and satellite constellations. In Germany, factory orders rose despite higher input costs. Orders unexpectedly increased in June as companies built stockpiles of parts and equipment. Demand held steady even as material costs climbed. Businesses appear to be accumulating inventory to guard against possible supply interruptions linked to tensions in the Middle East. The June increase occurred while input costs rose sharply across several manufacturing sectors. The Wall Street Journal linked the resilience to concerns over potential supply interruptions from Middle East tensions. Manufacturers appear to be front-loading purchases to avoid future shortages. Economists note that such stockpiling can support output in the short term, but may mask underlying weakness if new orders later slow. The pattern suggests companies are prioritizing continuity of production over immediate cost control. Now, some progress worth knowing about. Takeda seeks inclusion of its dengue vaccine in India's national program. The company is working to add its dengue vaccine to India's childhood immunization schedule. Officials aim to expand protection against a disease that affects large parts of the country each year. The effort follows successful trials and regulatory reviews in other markets. Indian health authorities are evaluating cost and supply capacity before any rollout decision. Nikkei Asia reported the effort follows successful trials and regulatory reviews. The main complication remains aligning vaccine pricing and distribution logistics with existing program budgets. The company must demonstrate that the vaccine can be produced and delivered at scale within India's public health infrastructure. Now, to really understand this story, there is something most coverage leaves out. Most reporting on strikes against oil facilities focuses on immediate damage counts. Yet the deeper mechanism is how such attacks shift global refining capacity and force buyers to reroute crude and product flows over weeks or months. When a refinery goes offline, nearby plants must increase runs or imports must rise, raising costs for every downstream user from trucking fleets to power generators. Historical cases, such as disruptions during the 2019 attacks on Saudi facilities, showed that even partial shutdowns can lift regional product prices for 30 to 60 days until spare capacity elsewhere compensates. The same logic applies when Ukrainian strikes reduce Russian output. European buyers may turn to alternative suppliers, lengthening shipping routes and tightening available tanker capacity. Knowing this pattern, when coverage highlights a single day's strike, readers can check whether follow-up reporting tracks actual throughput data from neighboring refineries or changes in tanker bookings rather than stopping at the initial explosion. The concrete detail to verify next is whether official monthly oil product export figures from the affected countries show a sustained drop or a quick rebound. If you want to go deeper on the Ukraine refinery strikes, compare how The Guardian and Nikkei Asia are covering it. Tomorrow, watch for any announcement from Indian health authorities on whether the dengue vaccine will enter the national schedule. That's Omni View. As always, compare outlets, look for primary documents, and separate what's known from what's assumed. The world is complicated, but it's not beyond understanding, and you just spent a few minutes understanding it better. If that's worth something to you, subscribe wherever you listen. See you tomorrow. And if you'd rather watch than listen, find us on YouTube at Nera Network. Links in the show notes. This show comes to you from the Nera Network. If you want another sharp daily briefing, Offshore North has you covered. Offshore ocean racing explained every Monday with a Canadian angle. All our shows are free at naranetwork.com. New to the network? naranetwork.com Start Here picks the right daily briefing for you in about 2 minutes. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.